Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back.
Hi, Katie.
To this. Hi, Josh. Oh, I think Kevin's here too. Danielle, Brian.
Hi.
Is everyone here today?
Brian does not look here. That's the biggest yawn I've ever seen in my life.
I think Brian is still recovering from APAP. So hello, everyone, and welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates, and we are doing our APAP recap today. So let's go around the table. Josh
Benson coming at you from Marion, Illinois at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center.
Kevin Maynard, coming at you from the Winter Storm Haven in Tallahassee, Florida.
Danielle.
Hey, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in the very cold McLean, Virginia. And I know it's not nearly as cold as it is for you, but you need to understand it's bad.
Brian
Zelmer from Bardavon Presents here in the beautiful Hudson Valley of New York.
Excellent. And like I said, I am Katie. I'm coming to you from Midland, Michigan, where it's currently 4 degrees. Yes, 4 degrees. All right. Well, everyone just finished up with APAP 2025. So we are going to talk about some highlights, some things that we love, things I enjoyed, hot topics, and do a little APAP recap today. So first of all, I unfortunately did not get to go to APAP this year because I was visiting family prior to the conference, actually in New York and northern New Jersey. But these four were there. And so I'm going to play host today, and we're going to get their thoughts on the experience in 2025. So I know the four of you all went to see Sunset Boulevard the very first night you were all together in town. So give me the skinny on Sunset Boulevard.
Brian, you had a majestic experience with Sunset Boulevard that pulled all of us in and made us all want to go and see it with you. So what was it about the original?
Sunset Boulevard has always been on one of my top 10s. I saw it, the original production, years and years ago, and it was just so majestic. I'm trying to remember now, Elaine Page and one of the other diva stars. And of course, I listened endlessly to Glenn Close's version on the soundtrack. And just, I've always loved the show. And it was just all about the glitz and the glamour and the costumes and the sets. And of course, this version I knew because it was completely stripped down. And that's an overstatement. It was literally no sets and literally no costumes. And
there were costumes.
Well, they were wearing slips and they were clothed, but they weren't necessarily like costumes. And so I knew I figured I was either going to hate it or love it because it's so different. I ended up landing somewhere in the middle. I thought the cast, first of all, was phenomenal. Mandy Gonzalez was playing the lead role in it, and she was amazing, and so was all of the cast. I thought the video work that they did that was new in this was really innovative and cool, and there's not giving any spoilers, but there's a point where the lead male goes out, literally leaves the theater and keeps singing. A camera follows him to Times Square, and he doesn't miss a beat, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then he's singing the whole time all the way back to the theater itself. So there were some really cool elements. But for me, I think the stripped down version took away from, I mentioned to all of you how iconic a role that Norma Desmond is, the lead female in the show. She's one of the all-time divas of Broadway characters, and one of the most powerful women, characters on Broadway. And I don't think this version, after talking to you, because you never saw the original, it didn't have that power with it being so stripped down. It was just kind of meh, which I feel bad because, again, the cast did an amazing job. I blame the producers and the director.
Like the production itself just did not meet my expectation with being so stripped down, because I have always known of Sunset Boulevard as being this big, grand, extravagant thing. And I felt let down by the way the production was staged. And I'll second what Brian said. The performances were amazing. Mandy Gonzalez, phenomenal performance. Impressed by every aspect of what they did, just not it as a complete package as a show.
I think as time goes on, I like the show more and more. When I left the theater that night, I was kind of like, meh. I didn't know anything about Sunset Boulevard going into it. And I I enjoyed my time in the theater, but the more I think about the show and the more I think about what they were trying to do and, make it look like a black and white film and the way they set up sort of the beginning, the more I think back on it, the more I like it. But in the moment, I was sort of underwhelmed by it. And I don't know. And I think maybe that's just a sign of theater, and maybe it's a sign of like good theater is that like it makes you think and it sticks with you. So I think I will take this with me as a production that I really enjoyed because I can't stop analyzing it.
Yeah, I also went into it with zero idea of what was going to happen, what it was about. And I thought that the way that they did the camera work and the projection and like a lot of haze, like really kind of set the tone for where the show was. It was like the atmosphere was set like in lieu of the setting, which I didn't quite get at the beginning. I was like, okay, so when is it going to like when is everything kind of going to start? But the thing that I loved about it was that like we were in the back row, and like I'm small, like I often can't, like I have an obstructed view pretty much no matter where I sit. But because like, a good part of the show was projected on the wall, like you could really see the emotion in the characters, and it had like a little bit. Oh, it had a cinematic feel to it. Like there were times where I was like, well, I don't want to see the cinema because I'm at the theater. But it did like provide really unique perspectives. Because a lot, there you could see what was happening on stage, and then, there would be like a different angle of that character. So you could kind of see their interior and exterior thoughts and emotions. And I'm kind of with everybody else in that like singing, the cast was like exceptional. The idea of like doing it very minimal with all of that film technology, awesome. I just feel like I want to see that on a different show.
I think another major problem with it was the direction. Again, not the performers themselves, but they didn't have them connect with each other, physically looking away from each other, like talking out a lot. And it was hard to get invested into the characters. It was just where in the original, you really feel the connection and the relationships between all the characters. In this, it was missing. Like it wasn't just missing, it just wasn't there. And so anyway, it was kind of somewhere in the middle for me, but the original definitely stays in my top 10.
Well, let's talk about another show briefly before we really get into the conference. I was out in New York just before you all were. I literally was like 2 blocks from the conference hotel. I waved, sent my good energy to all of you before y'all got there. But I got to spend a whole day on Broadway myself. So I got to go see Stuffs. So first I went and had dim sum. Amazing. And then I went and saw Stuffs. And I cried the whole time, entire 2.5 hours, just a sob fest from Katie. To be expected. Then had Mediterranean. And then I went and saw Maybe Happy Ending starring Darren Criss. And Josh, I know you also went and saw Maybe Happy Ending. What were your thoughts?
Maybe Happy Ending was the delight of my trip.
I thought I was.
Yeah, what up?
Yeah, y'all were my secondary delight.
I thought Halal was your secondary.
Oh, it was not. Maybe Happy Ending was such a refreshing new original musical. Best robot love story I've ever seen. But it really just, it was so well crafted. I went and saw it with Max Darwin, and he and I talked about it for an hour and a half after the show. About all of the different aspects of it and what it leaves you with and the questions it leaves you with. And it leaves you with a question as to what the characters even decided at the end of it. It was just so beautifully crafted, and they did not play to the lowest common denominator. They treated their audience as an intelligent audience. They could figure things out for themselves. They didn't spell everything out. They didn't lay everything out. They let you figure it out. They let you absorb it and be a part of the story in that way. And it was really just so beautifully crafted.
Yeah, I agree, Josh. There were things that happened on the stage technically that I've never seen. in a theater production before. And so I was just blown away by some of the technical aspects. And there's also projection in this show too. Now I've seen that in Oklahoma. You all just described how they use in Sunset Boulevard. They had projection as well, but used in such a smart and thoughtful way and not overused. And some of the other elements I don't want to spoil for the audience, but just things I had never seen before. But I think the use of technology meshed with this 1950s meet cute love story and sort of the costume and set aesthetic was a really beautiful blending of these two sort of different moments in time. And I don't know, I had such an emotional roller coaster of a day that day, sort of seeing stuffs. And I personally am so invested in women's suffrage and that story of the suffrage movement. I've done a whole programming series in a past life about women's history in the 20th century, starting with that point in time. So for me, that was really meaningful. So I had this big emotional moment, and then to go see maybe Happy Ending and just be blown away in a completely different way by that show was a really beautiful day of theater. And I think like that is some of the beauty that is going to conference and going to another place and seeing art is just like, you can have so many different experiences in one day. And yeah, so highly recommend going to see that show. If you haven't checked out their social media, they're also doing an amazing job with social on Maybe Happy Ending. And I think you could really garner some inspiration for like fun and wacky things that you could do with your socials as well. All right, let's talk conference. So Brian and Kevin, you both went to conference with new jobs. So what was different about conference this year? How did that change your strategy? What did you observe coming at conference with a slightly new perspective?
Yeah, I approach the conference obviously differently than I have in the past couple of years because I'm really back to programming, back to doing a bit more meetings with different agencies. When I was with Quad City Arts, we had somebody that was focusing on the programming for us. And my job was really there to make some introductions. Here was sort of relearning the landscape because not only am I back into programming, but I'm in a completely different territory. And so for many of those organizations that have, the US split up into different territories, I now have a new rep. So I was meeting people for the first time and sort of building those relationships from the ground up. Thankfully, a lot of the agencies that I've worked closely in the past, my Midwest rep was there to sort of do the handoff and make the introduction, which was really nice. But I will also say that some of the larger agencies did not care. And it was like, here is your new person. Good luck.
You had a ton of meetings. Every time I was like, hey, what are you up to? You were like, I don't know, 18 meetings.
Yeah. And it was really just about like rebuilding some of those relationships and trying to figure out, what has worked here in the past and how we're moving forward. So this year I did a lot of meetings outside of the hall. I did a couple meetings inside the hall once I got there because there were just people that I wanted to see after seeing some showcases. Honestly, it was a different approach with more meetings, but it was also sort of the same approach that I've had in the past of making sure that I sat down and was like, these are the agencies that I would need to meet with, and then I'll sort of leave some space available for some discovery.
My APAP this year was very much like Kevin's and being introduced to several people. You mentioned big agencies, and I won't name the agency, but let's just call it ABC Agency. So ABC Agency up to this current job, when I previously would approach them, I would get to talk to the intern of the secretary of the assistant to the agent, and they would usher me, not even let me stop walking. They'd kind of usher me, oh, it's great you stopped by. And the next thing I know, I'm at the next booth down the table. This time I just popped over. I was looking, someone saw my badge at ABC booth and they're like, oh, Bardavon. Oh, and they literally interrupted the meeting the agent was in so they can come meet me because we do a lot of business with them. And that's something like, it was nice being on this side of it, but at the same time, that's one of the things I don't like about some of the big agencies. Yes, I know they're super busy and they need to, be careful with their time, but just, I don't know, that making people have different tiers or levels and not making, it's just like a lack of respect. And honestly, I never really liked that. But, it is nice to be on that side of it.
Yeah, Brian, I had a very similar experience, and not only with agents, but also with people that I had met at years past conferences, that I would have this conversation with. And it was sort of like, oh, yeah, like placating, this like brush off. And then, but this year was like, oh my gosh, like you're now with FSU and da-da-da. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. And like, it makes me not like you.
And the worst part is I would do business with these other agencies. Like I was at a smaller venue, but I would do business with them. And the fact they wouldn't even talk to you was just really, it always gave me a bad taste in my mouth. Unfortunately, they have the artists that I want to book or need to book, so I still need to work with them. But honestly, if I had a choice and I could just book that artist another way, I would, because yeah.
Yeah, I will say it is nice that Josh Benson now gives me the time of day. So there are some nice things about that. So
I apologize to both you and Brian for not paying attention to you until now. But now that you're in a respectable position, I can actually speak to you in public, and I appreciate that.
So, Josh, this was your first APAP as an APAMA board member, correct?
Kind of.
Yes. You were elected at the last APAP.
I was elected onto the board halfway through APAP last year. I think being on the slate last year to be a part of it, more people came to me with issues and concerns last year than they did this year. And so I thought that was really interesting. I actually had more conversations about people's concerns last year than I did this year.
Maybe it's because in your first year, you solved all the concerns and now everything's perfect. Yep. So congratulations. Nice work.
Everybody's perfectly happy with everything about conferencing, and
the industry is solid. So
Well, let me ask this from an APAMA perspective, and sort of now going through several conferences. We've talked a lot about sort of the agent artist presenter relationship, that triangle, and how, it shifted a lot in the last 5 years. So how does APAMA feel, or how does your membership feel about sort of that ongoing transition of relationship between those three entities?
I think there's an ongoing concern, but it's always been a concern about general behavior at conferences. But like behavior in showcases from a presenter standpoint, there was one showcase at the Iridium that a presenter started harmonizing and singing along with the showcase. And things like that are just generally unacceptable behavior for anyone in our industry, let alone during a showcase that someone's investing their own time and money into to get exposure. And so there are ongoing concerns with things like that. But those ethical questions are on both sides of the aisle, as far as how we handle ourselves and how we carry ourselves at conferences from a professional standpoint.
So Danielle, what about youth and family programming opportunities? I know there was a youth and family session that you attended, and were there any youth and family showcases this year?
Yeah, so I've been attending APAP in my role here at the Alden, only presenting youth and family shows since 2016. And I think, and like those are like earlier years for me, it was like there were youth and family showcases if you were looking for them, like you could find them. And, I would kind of like do that in the morning, and then the afternoon and evening would be like meetings and really just like things that kind of filled my cup. But this year, there were 4 dedicated showcases that were like hours and hours long of really, really incredible youth and family artists, just back to back to back to back. And at least the rooms I was in were just double packed full of people. I was like squished against the wall for a little while and learned my lesson to be on time the next day. And I saw so many great things, artists that I thought I knew what the show was, and I was completely wrong and was blown away and was like immediately like running to that booth and being like, this is the date I need for that. And there's also so many other youth and family showcases that are sort of peppered throughout the rest of the day. Now they're not necessarily like labeled youth and family, but I think that maybe if you want to call it like all ages type programming, I think is becoming something that more people are looking for. And there are more artists creating work in that category, which is super exciting for me. And we also had our youth and family forum at the beginning of the session, or at the beginning of conference. And, again, like that was another place where we could see the interest in this part of the industry really growing. We had a full room of folks again. And when we asked, whose first APAP is this, like a good third of the room raised their hand.
That is awesome to hear, Danielle. I'm so glad that you got to see so many good things. You're gonna have to tell me all about them. But that youth and family forum really is important, just in terms of there isn't a dedicated conference right now. It's still sort of in the works. People are still talking about what that's going to look like. But in lieu of that, having a dedicated space at Max and a dedicated space at APAP really has helped bring folks in our part of the industry together and given us a space to connect. And I love hearing that there's even more attention, sort of more space for youth and family and all ages performers as well. That's really awesome to hear.
Yeah, and we had some tough conversations too. Some of the things that got brought up in the sharing part of that were some really tough things to hear. And it's kind of sets the tone then, for the rest of the conference and the connections that you make there. And I felt like I got to have probably deeper conversations with my colleagues in the youth and family space, just sort of because we ripped the Band-Aid off at the beginning.
Nice. That's awesome. So speaking of showcases and PD, what were the best showcases or PD that y'all attended?
I honestly didn't attend tons of showcases this year. Every APAP's a little different for me. Some years, tons of showcases and I love it. But for some reason, just the way it worked out with my new job and everything, I wasn't here for doing too much showcasing. But I did get to see the Fabulous Equinox Orchestra's event that they have, and Baron Ryan played, and he did an incredible job, and I always love to hear him play. But I also got to see Norbert Leo Butz, and he's starting a one-man show and going out and hitting the road, and I'm really excited about that because he had some great storytelling, and I just didn't know a lot about him before, including we made a connection because he actually auditioned for his first Broadway role, was playing Roger in Rent on the Sunday nights. He was the Sunday night Roger. And so I got to chat a little bit about the experience of that because you guys all know how much of a Rent head I am. So that was pretty cool.
That was a very nice photo that you got to take with him, Brian. I hope you weren't fangirling too much.
That was mid-conversation, and we got interrupted by a colleague we all know. That really pissed me off.
Which circles back to our question of ethics.
So I'm not going to name names because that's not appropriate, but since it was brought up, I was having a great conversation with Norbert Leo Butz in the expo hall. He was at Pat Hazel's booth because Pat is representing him now. And another colleague came in, interrupted our conversation. Leo even said, because my back was to the colleague, Leo even said, hold on a second, we're in a conversation. And that colleague still continued to disrupt us. And then other people came in. And so we got cut off mid-conversation and didn't get to have that. And there are expo hall, there's rules to follow that we all agree to, and including you don't interrupt conversations, especially in the expo hall.
So as far as showcases, I saw quite a few showcases. There was ones that I've obviously loved year after year. But this year there were two that I saw, actually both with Danielle, that I really enjoyed. There was one of them is directly responsible by you. Yeah. So the other one I dragged you along to. So the first one that I dragged Danielle to was a guy that goes by the name OK Cello, or Corey Johnson is his name. He does a cello with a loop pedal, but also does some really great videography and things behind him.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And somebody that I've wanted to see for a couple of years, and sort of at the last minute found out he was showcasing. So I made Danielle come check that out with me. We saw an interesting thing before that, but then were rewarded with OK Cello. So that was really fantastic. And then Danielle and another colleague and I went and saw Little Murmur, which is a dance piece by the Akasha Dara Dance Company. And over the past year, it turns out that I am just an absolute fanboy of Akasha Dara's work and just really love everything that I've seen him put together. And so what I loved about that piece was obviously the performance, but really it was the talk back afterwards, to where the kids, like little kids, got to ask the dancer questions about the piece. And in that conversation, we learned a lot more about how the piece was created, why the piece was created. And it just made me enjoy that experience that much more.
And maybe I've just never paid attention to this before, but that show is at the New Vic and was a part of the Under the Radar Festival. And it was really interesting to me that there was something that was for definitely like an older group of kids, like an older elementary and up, that was part of Under the Radar.
Also, the smallest seats I've ever sat in. So not like width-wise, but like I could not fit in the seats.
It was so deeply funny. And I've never fit more perfectly in a seat.
I was going to say. They sound like Danielle's size seats.
Yeah.
So, Josh, I know you loved the keynote address by Seth Godin. You want to talk about that for a moment?
The conversation he had that day was really good on many levels, but one of my favorite takeaway from it was stop trying to get the audience to love you for what you are, but to meet them where they need you to be. So essentially, like, one of the age-old things with organizations is, hey, this is who we are. How do we get the next generation to love us and care about us and be there? But the reality is they're not going to love you for who you are now if you're not meeting them where they are. Their expectations, their desires, their wants change with every generation. And if you're not adapting and moving and being nimble as an organization to meet them there, then you're never going to capture that. So without losing yourself, become what they want and what they need.
I mean, if you really do think about that, the culture of an entire generation is a hard thing to try and shift as one singular organization.
But I mean, it's evident in a lot of things that we're seeing programming right now, like Cypress Hill with an orchestra. Like
all of the Jukebox Broadway shows.
All of those are avenues to meet the next generation where they are now, to fall in love with what it had been before by meeting them where they are now.
And do we have to continue to be what we were before? Like, is that a thing that we have to continue doing?
No, that's how you get left in the past.
I mean, I think it's why turnover in an organization is very important. I mean, change is okay. And I think leadership turnover is one of those things that people need to start planning for and just accepting.
I think more precisely than change is okay, change is necessary.
Absolutely.
Change is essential to moving forward.
And change is going to happen no matter what, which was the topic of the succession planning session I went to.
I just wish a host on that one was better.
I was asked to moderate that one, and I didn't go in very excited about it. I'll be honest. I was like, oh, this is a boring topic. But was I wrong? We had over 100 people in attendance, and there were tears. There was tons of emotion. It was very heartfelt, the session. But basically what came up is I think it was Mark Balin that said, look, you can change. You can fight change, or you could try to keep things the way they are, but it's going to change no matter what. And that could be like when you die, like you're not going to live. Nobody lives forever. Like it's a hard reality. And this is something that nobody likes to mention or talk about. But the fact is, it's either going to change because you leave and someone else comes in, or you leave and it dies and it goes away, or you physically can't do it anymore, or you die. But change is going to happen, whether you like it or not. You can resist it as much as you want, but you're never going to stop change from happening. So that was a big part of the underpinning of it. And then the other big emotional part of that session really centered around the fact that there were several people that had ended their organizations that they started. They were there a long time, some of them 30, 40 years. Some of them had rolled them off to new people or just shut down. And they all talked about the same thing. They didn't expect when they left after working something for so long, that how much of what the work they were doing was part of their identity. And they just felt grief, like they felt tremendous grief and loss that they didn't expect it to hit them that way. And that was a very popular topic that was going around. And there was one, I felt really bad for a presenter who was in one of the southern states who had been at a program for a long time and wanted to really, about 10, 15 years ago, wanted to go and take the next step, grow in her career. But she felt such tremendous pressure because every time she was getting ready to go, something happened at her organization and they begged her to stay. And they were like, this organization's going to fall apart without you. And she started crying because she's like, I want, now I'm 10, 15 years older. I'm at an age where people aren't hiring people my age. Let's be realistic. There's ageism out there. And it's now I still want to do this work. I want to go and grow, but no one's going to hire me. And I feel so stuck in this position where this weight is on my shoulders that this organization is going to die. And someone in the audience just said, if that's what it's meant to be, you need to take care of yourself first. Do what's right for you, because if the organization's not going to continue, then it's not going to continue. And that's part of the life cycle too.
Yeah, this is a topic I think we could spend an entire episode on, but I do think it's really fascinating that succession planning at conferences is always fairly well attended. It's a great conversation because people, I think EDs really want to have that conversation. Organizations, people inside those organizations want to have those conversations. But for most of them, it's their boards that aren't ready to have that because they don't want to think about their beloved leader leaving or having to worry about that change. And one of the things that, Brian, I think you touched on, that presenter who has been there for 10, 15 years, maybe longer than they expected to be, is, somebody once told me when I was starting to think about leaving Quad City Arts, and I was like, I can't leave because I already got this going and I've got this going. And they told me, there's always going to be something. Like there's never a perfect time to leave an organization. There's never a perfect time to really do anything. And you sort of have to, like you said, take care of yourself because it's never going to be a perfect time to do that.
And the other thing about succession planning was that they focused on it's not just about the executive director or the top person.
Exactly.
That there's a lot of things that young people should be thinking about. And there's personal succession and then there's organizational succession. And so we got into a lot of different topics. And it was just, what I'm trying to say is it was nowhere near the boring topic I thought it was going to be. It was so rich and so wide and encompassing. And so we're asking APAP and others to make sure that they definitely continue having tracks for that, because we were just scratching the surface.
No, I agree with you, Kevin. I think we could talk about this a lot more, and we're going to put on the list, I think, of conversations to have in the future. But I so identify with that feeling of grief, Brian. When I made my shift earlier in 2024, like it was a good 6 weeks that I was a complete and total mess because I could not fathom not going to work at a performing arts facility every day. Like it was such a hard transition for me. And because it was a part of my identity, I would say my job title before I would say that I'm a mother or that I'm anything else. Like it's job first. And that is how we are trained. And that's how we are programmed. And so I do think it's the combination of pandemic and new generation and new ways of thinking about that sort of thing is helping us sort of unwind that programming. I think it's a really interesting place to be in. I'm really glad that you all had that conversation. Any other observations, any other hot topics that folks are talking about that we want to mention before we wrap today, friends?
I'd say general observation, still pack a Tide Pen. I think I was hour in on day one when I needed it because apparently I eat like a child. So
as someone who's had several meals with you, yes.
That's hurtful.
So I fell into my favorite showcase a little bit by accident. I went to the session about work ready to tour. So APAP had in the expo hall sort of like a speed dating session on works that were getting ready to tour. And it was like 7-minute conversations to just sort of hear a pitch about a show that was going out. And I met the group Versa Style Street Dance Company. And we had a great conversation about the show they were doing and a lot of the general outreach they do. And it sounded super interesting. And Miss Jackie was just like somebody that I wanted to get to know more. But then our 7 minutes was up and I like went along my way just being like, I should probably see them in the future. And the next day I was standing in line downstairs to get my 8th coffee. And out of nowhere, I just heard my name and I turned and I looked and there she is. And she was like, Danielle. And again, shocked that she knew my name. I know I have a name tag on, but still. she was like, you need to come to our showcase. And I was like, oh, okay, what time? It was like an hour from then. And so, I mean, what was I supposed to do? Of course I went. And I was just absolutely blown away. There, again, I'm small and it's hard for me to see in places where you're on the same level as the dancers. So, and so much of what they were doing was near the ground because breaking. And I was like 2 minutes in, I was up and like in the aisle, like craning so that I could be like, I just kept creeping closer and closer to the stage area because I was just in awe of what they were doing and was there completely by accident, and then happened to be sitting by potential routing partners. Just like walked out of there being like, well, looks like I just planned my dance for next year or 2 years from now. And that's sort of why I try to plan my schedule as well as I can, but I also leave room for magic because that was some dang magic.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love how that speed dating turned into something like a great connection and then something productive for you. And hopefully they'll get a booking out of it. So great. Thanks for sharing, Danielle. All right, friends, that is our time for our APAP recap. I wanted to throw some dates your way. So if you are looking to do more conferencing in 2025, here is what is coming up. May 6th through 8th, TWA USA is going to be in Washington, D.C. June 1 through 3, Napama is holding their retreat in Wilmington, North Carolina. So you can go hit the beach with Josh. September 2 through 5, Western Arts Alliance is going to be in LA. September 15th through 18th, Max is going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And January 9th through 13th, 2026 will be our next APAP. So thank you all for joining us today. Hope you had a great conference if you were at APAP. Hope you all are staying warm wherever you are during this polar vortex. And join us next week for more There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Vanhook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
I was thinking as Danielle was talking that as our radio signals go out into deep space and some alien race listens to us, they're going to think we have problems with wind because the amount of times we talk about getting blown away. So, like, I think we've all said it at different times. Like, oh my God, it just blew me away.
Is this a fart commentary?
Welcome to Fartcast.
Josh, I'm surprised you didn't talk about self-care and how you got sick one day after having late night
halal. Meh.
Let them find out on their own.
Yep. Looking forward to the stories.
Yeah. You need to burn those hotel rooms after we all left.
Oh,
Jesus.
God.
God.
Yeah, it was weird to be by myself in the hotel. Like my internal clock was very bad. I would just be like, okay, this is what I need to get up. And then I would be like, I would just be walking around the room and be like, I guess I'll take a shower now. Like, Katie wasn't there to be like, okay, now it's yours. Like, okay, now I have to shower because Katie told me to. And Katie being like, okay, we got to go now so we can get breakfast before we make it to her. Yes. Excellent. Great. Now I know three other things I need to do. I was just
How many conferences have you guys shared rooms now? How many conferences altogether? I know Max, APAP last year.
2 APAPs, 2 Maxes.
2 APAPs.
So 5 times?
Wow.
5 times.
And WA.
Wow.
And WA.
Oh, and
yeah.
WA, yeah.
So 5 conferences. 2 Maxes, 2 APAPs, and a WA. That's
Wow.
2 girls, 5 rooms.
Nope.
End the recording.
Fine.